I got out of school, probably like many of you here in the audience as well, I set off to travel the world. And as you do when you travel, you learn a lot about yourself. I also came to learn a lot about the environment, the state of the environment as impacted by us humans. There was this one particular moment I took a diving course outside the east coast of Australia, and I had a conversation with my instructor. She told me that by no means could I go too close to any of the corals in the reefs. Why, I said? She said, because the reef is dying. It's dying because of pollution, because of human-induced climate change, which heats up the atmosphere, that heats up the oceans, which acidifies the oceans and kills the corals. As I returned to Sweden, I came to learn that global average temperature has risen with almost 1 degree since pre-industrial times. Now, this number might have been very much more abstract to me if I hadn't seen what this has already done to the Great Barrier Reef. Because I also learned that, in fact, 1/3 of the corals in the world are already destroyed beyond repair, and 2/3 are under serious threat as well, unless we halt this development. Now, climate change is, of course, not just impacting coral reefs. During several travels to come, I have met people whose lives are already very much affected, from people in the Philippines whose homes and whole villages get destroyed from more frequent and severe tropical storms, to the indigenous peoples here in our Nordic countries whose traditional livelihoods are threatened as the winter season is becoming shorter. Climate change is affecting economies and societies all around the globe. In fact, scientists are telling us that the risks we are facing from these impacts are so severe that business as usual is no longer an alternative. We have to transform from an economy and a society which is based and dependent on burning coal, oil, and gas to one which is powered by clean and renewable energy sources. We have to break the norm which has put ourselves on a path to unsustainable living. Now, when I returned from that first travel to Sweden with these daunting insights of what my ways of living were doing to other people on the planet and to the environment, I felt some kind of desperation to do something. Now, the problem was, of course, I had no clue what, or how, or with whom. But it took a while for me to realize, but of course, I was not the only one feeling this way. Having this combination of feelings of anger and frustration, yet eagerness and willingness to do something. Wherever I turned my head, it seemed like there were other young people who felt exactly like me, but who just hadn't really found their way of doing things yet. Because there was another frustration there as well. The frustration that those in so-called real power don't really listen to us. That we as young people don't actually have that influence over these decisions that so profoundly impacts our future. So a couple of us who came to meet and over the course of a couple of years met more and more young people who felt this way, we sat down together and we thought, well, what do we need then? What do we need to make sure that these feelings of hopelessness and anxiety over the problems are dealt with, and that we can channel these new ideas and the disruptive thinking that so many young people have that they want to use to contribute to a sustainable society? How do we make sure that we combine all those into one strong voice so that we can actually influence policy making? Well, we decided we needed some kind of platform, a network, and we decided to call it Push Sweden, or Sverige in Swedish. And now, almost 4 years since we had this idea, I'm standing here in front of you today, and I have decided to talk about why it is my true belief that every action counts. Every action counts not because that action alone will halt climate change, but because it will inspire others to also take action. Because when we set out to do this a couple of years ago, we had no real clue what we were doing, to be honest. We had never started an organization. What is the platform, anyway? And, I mean, we all had different ways of thinking in organizing different experiences and knowledge about these topics that we set out to try and influence. We even had different theories of change. What do we actually have to do to create the changes that we want? So we started with what we share. We shared a vision about a truly sustainable society based on a set of values. And these values are, among many others, that the society is based on and run by renewable energy solely. That we understand and try to minimize our dependency on finite natural resources, and that civil society play an active role in shaping the society that we want. Now, these values, they provoke us to think differently and to do differently. How do we set out to try and lead towards sustainability based on these norms, where the norm is actually, whether we like it or not, that we consume products and energy no matter where they are produced or how they are produced? Let's take some examples. We started with an online platform where the basic idea is that young people can meet and they can share their ideas of what they are doing. From this idea, we quickly grew in numbers and hence in power. This is one of our members. She is taking part of a panel debate where it was discussed how to use the forest industry in Sweden to tackle climate change. She is challenging the idea that what is most efficient is maybe not what is desirable or sustainable, urging actors, decision makers, to take in the aspect of biodiversity into this decision making. Several of us who started and founded Push Sweden, we had never arranged protests before, but some of us had, and this is a very important thing for many of our members and member organizations, that we protest when decisions are being taken which go against what politicians have promised to do to tackle climate change. So here we are outside a conference center in Stockholm a couple of years ago where leading scientists were presenting their report on the causes of climate change. We gathered more than 100 people outside this conference center, and we had this idea of an action called a climate scream. So what we did was that we just screamed our lungs out. If you want to know what it sounds like, you just Google climate scream on YouTube. We did this because we had a very clear message to communicate. As young people, we are fed up with the inaction that politicians have, because we are the ones who are going to have to live tomorrow with the actions or the inactions that politicians are taking today. Now, this action is very simplistic in its nature, yet seen as quite radical, challenging us in what we can and are allowed to do to make change or to demand change. Now, probably because of this, every media channel that covered this event, they also covered our action, and our message was spread across the whole country and beyond. Every action counts. But we also want to provide solutions. So once a year, we gather young people from all over Sweden during our yearly sustainability conference in a safe space where we together can visualize how we want Sweden to look like in a more sustainable way. And we make sure that these visions are then handed over to politicians. Of course, the idea of a platform is also that young people who have a business idea, which might be that you want to rebuild old petrol cars into ones run by biogas, then they can find and connect with other young people who have similar ideas, and they can develop them together and hopefully scale them up. Now, the actions of these guys truly counts. Let's pause here for a while and think that the call to action is finally being heard. Last year, after more than 20 years of negotiations, 195 governments finally agreed to collectively tackle climate change. This is a huge and necessary step forward. But scientists are telling us that we cannot exceed 1.5 or 2 degrees average global warming by the end of this century if we are to avoid irreversible impacts. And now remember that we already passed 1. And individual countries' pledges to this amazing collective effort are still not enough. They're still putting us on a path to 3 to 4 degrees global warming by the end of this century, clearly more must be done. Coal, oil, and gas, they have built the societies as we know it. And because of this reason, the norm of investing in fossil fuel companies has not been challenged. But scientists are telling us that the majority of coal, oil, and gas need to stay in the ground while we focus our entire attention onto developing clean, renewable, innovative energy solutions to power our societies. A movement has risen the last couple of years around the world, led by students who challenge their public institutions in their local community to stop investing in fossil fuel companies and free up these investments for clean solutions. Inspired by these actions from around the world, we, a couple of young people from within the PUSH network and beyond, we started challenging our Swedish universities. You know, institutions are supposed to support our future, to stop investing in fossil fuel companies. Over a course of 2 years, we gathered thousands of signatures for a petition supporting our cause. We had meetings with the board. We protested what seemed to be over and over again without getting listened to. So finally, we took a decision and we said, all right, let's send a press release to the media. Let's expose the fact that our university is ignoring the will of its students and its staff, because a lot of staff were also supporting us. I think it's fair to say, though, that we didn't really believe that they would care, because why would they care? But they did. Almost every news outlet in our country picked up our story, and it was even heard beyond. And a very short time after, the university got rid of those particularly dirty investments that we were targeting, and now has a policy which says that no direct holdings can be made into fossil fuel companies. Your oil fund here in Norway, Norska oljefondet, which wealth has been built on oil, last year decided to take away investments from companies which makes most of the revenues from coal and shift those investments into clean energy solutions. Now, this has been said by leading economists, it's not just good for the climate, but also good for the economy and the profitability of that fund. This movement around the world has inspired and actually forced institutions around the world to withdraw $3.4 trillion from fossil fuel companies and freeing up these investments to clean energy. Every action counts. As I prepared this talk, I reached out to the members of PUSH Sweden and I asked them, what is it that we're doing that is important? What are we doing that contributes in creating change? They said, well, we have created a space where the norm is that the voice of young people is what matters the most, what should be listened to, where the norm is that no action is too small or too big to be supported, to contribute to the bigger picture. To break the norm, any norm, you have to dare to say no, dare to suggest something different, dare the right of your voice to be heard. When I was given the tools and the space to speak up for what I believed in, I dared to do all this. I dared to challenge the way how I should live and how I should consume products, how power is supposed to be structured in society and what my power is, and what I am willing and capable of contributing with. We have come a long way. Young people still don't have the access to the very rooms of power, but we have put ourselves in the driving seat, refusing to accept that the decisions which so profoundly impacts our future are being made above our heads. 3 years since we founded this organization, many of our members have been listed as some of the most influential people in Sweden when it comes to sustainable development. What is more important, though, is that the call for action is being made by more and more actors across the globe. Demanding climate action is slowly becoming part of the norm. Businesses, health groups, trade unions, faith groups are all demanding more action and taking more action. And what is most important is that people around the globe are starting to practice integrated, sustainable solutions. Why own your own bicycle where you can share it with others? Different way of thinking around mobility. Different ways of thinking of how to consume products. Why buy them commercially from around the globe, where you can consume them organically from around the corner in your local community? New ways of producing energy. Why be dependent on others where you can produce your own? Different ways of producing food. Why having your food shipped around the globe when you can use the space, so much space that we have in our cities that can provide us with the food that we need? I Push Sweden or the divestment movement has not alone done this, but we have contributed to this development. Every action counts, not because that action alone will halt climate change, but because it will inspire others to also take action, and the sum of those actions together is greater than the individual parts, and this is what creates change. So, the least I can do is everything I can. What can you do? Thank you.